Mercy is a very iconic character within the Overwatch universe, and she's loved by many people out there for good reasons. She is fun to play, and she has an amazing design that really lends itself well to marketability. Now, for as much love that Mercy gets from the community, there's a lot of hate that goes towards her as well. Throughout all these years of Overwatch, Blizzard has always had a hard time balancing Mercy. A lot of people complain about Mercy not being strong enough, not, able to be played in higher ranks. And this is like so much to the point where even when I had stopped playing Overwatch and I had played League of Legends for 3 to 4 years, I would still hear a lot of people complaining about Mercy on Twitter or Reddit or whatever. And not even people complaining about Mercy being too weak, like Mercy players, but people who verse Mercy players, like DPS players or whatever, they do not like having Mercy in the games because Mercy just seems unfun or unfair to play against. She's just an annoying moth that cannot be killed or whatever. So I always see this discourse, this war, this feud that's happening around this like Mercy discussion, and I wanted to talk about it. By the way, my name is Luminum and I mostly make Overwatch content nowadays. This video will be pretty long, so if you could leave a like and subscribe, that'd be greatly appreciated. And just even commenting anything would be great. If you don't know what to comment, just comment Mercy. So why is it after all these years, Blizzard just seemingly can never balance Mercy? Mercy is either completely useless for the most part, or sometimes just really broken where everyone does not like her and can see that she's just unfair to play against or even with. Is it because Blizzard just hates Mercy? Is it because Blizzard hates the gays, girls, they, thems, and everyone in between? Well, it's none of that. It's actually because Mercy, on a fundamental level, is a very flawed character. So let's discuss that. Now, a lot of people out there have made their own suggestions on how they would fix Mercy and what buffs they would give to her. And every time I read all of these suggestions, I can't help but think like pretty much all of them are wrong in the sense that none of these changes, none of these suggestions would ever really fix Mercy's core problems because all of them are just like band-aid solutions. There's a real underlying problem with Mercy that people are just not addressing. I also do want to just say that I am Team Mercy. Like, I do love Mercy as a character. I like playing her and I do want the best for Mercy. But I also I'm aware that a character, for it to be healthy, also needs to be well received by other players out there that don't just play Mercy, but people who play with Mercy and against Mercy, right? There needs to be a healthy state for Mercy players and the people that play with the Mercy. So why do I think that Mercy is a fundamentally flawed character? What exactly is her problem? Well, before I tackle that question, I need to talk about two concepts within gaming. So hang tight, it's gonna take a while, but I promise you that'll be relevant to Mercy. Now for these two concepts, they're more in the realm of like game design and like psychology. Now I don't really have any credentials in terms of like, I'm not a game designer, I didn't study to be a psychologist, but you don't really need any of that to be able to just see that these are just the things that happen within game design. So let's talk about these two concepts. The first one is that for every strategy within gaming, there needs to be an answer. And number two is that when designing a character, there needs to be something called kit budgeting. I'll start off with the first concept. So when there's a strategy in a game, like a game plan, there needs to be an answer to counter that strategy. So for example, if we take Farah, she can fly. She has that advantage of vertical movement, and there needs to be a character that can answer her. And that would be hit scans, right? Hit scan characters or like Diva or whatever. Like imagine if Overwatch was full of melee characters that could not really move or dash or fly, and then there's Farah. That would make Farah like so OP, right? Like Farah could just shoot from above with no way to counter her. But we do have counters for her, which is hit scan. So you can kind of see like for every strategy, there should be a counter. So here comes the next important thing about concept one, which is the amount of effort to create that counter needs to be proportional to the effort made in playing that strategy. I don't know if I worded that correctly, but pretty much if you spend amount of effort or skill in the strategy or game plan or whatever, then the amount of work to counter it should also correlate, should also be proportional and be roughly the same. So I'm going to give you an example of this idea. So a long time ago in Overwatch 1, there was a strategy called Bunker Bastion. So back then in the 6v6 era, Bastion could stay in its turret form indefinitely, but the problem was Bastion could not move. There were also a lot of barriers happening, so like Reinhardt shield and Orisa shield. It was just a totally different time with lots of barriers protecting people. So Bunker Bastion, the idea was Bastion would sit still on defense or on a payload or whatever on a point, and everyone would just protect Bastion, and Bastion just goes wild and crazy and shoots down everything. By no means was Bastion like a top tier character. In fact, Bastion was kind of considered a troll pick back in my time. Like, not to say it was like the worst pick, but you know, there are definitely more better DPS characters out there compared to Bastion. And this bunker comp where everyone huddles up and shields for the Bastion, that too was not like a top tier comp at all. It was really a cheese comp. And I'm not talking about Goats meta. I'm aware Goats meta was a thing with 3 tanks, 3 supports, and some variation to it, and sometimes people would play Bastion against all these like tanks in the Goats meta, but I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about overall in Overwatch 1. Generally, Bastion was not considered a great pick, and generally, the bunker strategy was considered a cheese strategy that you would do like in overtime or like whatever. So the thing about the bunker Bastion comp is that in order to counter bunker Bastion, you would most likely just have to go full on dive with the whole entire team, right? There would be D.Va eating the bullets, and then maybe like Genji, Tracer diving in, and maybe other characters like Lucio or whatever. So here comes the biggest problem with this strategy, or just even this game design in general. So the biggest problems with these two comps in this battle was that Bunker Bastion comp was extremely hit or miss, and mostly misses. For the most part, Bunker Bastion comp did not work. It was completely useless, and only rarely did it ever really work. But when Bunker Bastion comp did work in those rare scenarios, it worked splendidly. It worked really, really well. Now on the other side, which was the dive comp, for the most part, dive comps did beat out Bastion. And you might think, well, what's the problem then? Well, the problem is that it took a lot more effort to play the dive comp than it was to play the Bastion comp. And this is actually something that Blizzard has explicitly spoken about and addressed in a patch note or a blog post. I can't exactly remember where exactly it is because it's been years, so I can't really find like a screenshot of it, but I do remember Blizzard specifically talking about this Bastion type of thing where it was just a lot more stressful and harder for the dive comp to play correctly and counter versus just playing the Bastion comp. Because let's be real, for the Bastion comp, you literally just pick Bastion, you pick Reinhardt, Orisa, put down your shield, and you pray, you manifest a win. It's not really that hard to just sit there with shields and all that. Like, let's just be real. But on the other hand, when it came to the dive comp, you would need everyone to kind of commit to diving, right? Like, you would need everyone to pick like D.Va, Genji, Tracer, whatever dive comp, which in itself is a hard feat in a solo queue environment. Like, getting anyone to swap in solo queue is a very hard thing to do. And I say that as I was a Symmetra main back then. I was a Symmetra one-trick, so I definitely did not help the situation. I had a lot of people complaining about how I was playing Symmetra and I was throwing and inting and just being overall useless. So look, I totally get it. Like, I was part of the problem back then, and I can say that getting people to swap in Overwatch is a hard thing to do in itself. And even when you did get people to swap off to the correct dive characters, you would all have to coordinate, communicate, and dive the Bastion at the same time. A D.Va could not just jump the Bastion by herself, she would need her teammates to also follow her. You know, everyone had to be in sync and doing everything at the same time, which is a lot more harder than people just putting up a Reinhardt shield for the Bastion to shoot anything. So you could see that the effort to counter that strategy was just not proportional at all. So this was a problem within Overwatch that Blizzard actually had to intervene by nerfing Bastion. I don't really exactly remember what they did to Bastion. All I know is that they did nerf him, and I remember them addressing it and saying it in their patch notes. Like, just imagine that you are a tank player in that time, and let's just say that you wanted to win and you play D.Va. You're like, hey, I'm gonna play D.Va, I'm gonna eat up all the bullets, like, let's go, let's work as a team. But then your team just is not swapping. Maybe they have a flop ass Widowmaker that just cannot shoot through the shells, and maybe you have like a one-trick Symmetra on your team that can't really do much to Bastion, even though she can kind of shoot through the shields with her orbs back then, but for the most part, your DPS are useless, or your other team is useless. So what is there to do? You're trying your best to help the team, you're trying your best to eat the bullets as diva, but really, one person can only do so much, right? So you can imagine how incredibly frustrating that would be for that tank player, diva player, whatever, because they just kind of have to accept the loss. And it's not even through their own fault because they're doing the correct thing in swapping to diva, whatever, but they're just being held back by the team. And in a solo queue environment, this happens all too often. We all know that it's hard to get people to swap, hard for people to counter, hard to get people to work as a team. So even though the dive comp works against the Bastion comp, and for the most part dive, when it works, beats out Bastion comp, it's just really difficult to just get going and working in the first place. And none of this has anything to do with win rates. I know a lot of people love to throw out like, oh, this has a 50% win rate, so therefore it's balanced or whatever. But really, even though the dive comp beats out the Bastion comp for the most part, it doesn't really matter because of a thing called loss aversion. So what is loss aversion? Loss aversion is a psychological thing where people hold on to the negative emotions of losing more than the positive emotions that comes from winning. So for example, someone could win 5 games in a row, but after that, they could lose 2 to 3 games, and let's just say those 2 to 3 games were horrible, like no one was working together, they were getting flamed, maybe getting slurred, maybe told to KYS or whatever. They're actually gonna hold on to those negative emotions so much to the point where it doesn't even matter that they climb ranks because they won more. They're overall gonna feel a lot more worse in the day. They're gonna feel like they just did not have fun, and the negative emotions are going to just outweigh the positive emotions. And this doesn't even really have to do with like winning or losing. Like this could even apply to things like, let's just say you work as a cash register or whatever, and maybe for the, I don't know, 6 hours that you work, it's like going well, it's fine, maybe some really nice customers or whatever. But all it takes is like 1 hour of like horrible customers, maybe your manager's horrible to you, to ruin your day. It doesn't matter that you had 6 hours of good work and happy times. All it takes is that 1 hour to completely ruin your day. And this is a very relevant thing in gaming. So win rates don't really paint the full picture for things, and the emotions that the player base feels is something that game designers really do have to factor in when making balance changes to the game, or just any game design at all. So that is concept 1. For every strategy, there needs to be a counter, and the amount of work needed to create that counter also needs to be in line with the amount of effort used to play that strategy. Concept 1. So the next concept we're going to be talking about, which I'll just say concept 2, is kit budgeting. So what is kit budgeting? Well, just like when you're budgeting for grocery, you're gonna spend more money on like the essential foods and whatnot. And then if you have a sweet tooth, you might spend some money on, you know, sweets or whatever. There's always like, you give more in this area, but you take away from another area. It's the same thing with game designing and when you're creating a character. There's always gonna be like a give and take that justifies a character design in any competitive game, and the keyword is justify. So for example, Widowmaker can one-shot with her headshots, and that is an amazing thing. That would be her give. Widowmaker, however, also has some downsides to it, which is that she is pretty inconsistent because it's a sniper, and she's pretty susceptible to getting dived on, which is the downside, which is her take, right? She has these downsides that justifies her strengths being able to headshot. Bastion has a lot of damage. He does one of the most, if not the most, DPS in the game if we're not factoring in things like Roadhog Ultimate. So what makes Bastion able to do that? Well, it's because of his downsides. Bastion's Terraform is on a cooldown, and it leaves him pretty vulnerable because 1, he has a very big hitbox and he's pretty slow. So the give to Bastion is his high damage. The takeaway is that he's pretty vulnerable and it's on a cooldown, right? There's always a give and a take when creating a character. Same thing with Symmetra. Symmetra has 140 DPS on her left clicking, I believe. She has pretty high ammo and she can recharge her ammo through hitting shields. So that's the give. The takeaway to Symmetra is that she has pretty low range and she has to charge her beam. Symmetra also cannot headshot with her beam, so there's a lot of downsides to Symmetra that justifies her having those numbers on her left clicking. So what about Mercy? What justifies Mercy's low healing output of 55 healing per second? Why can't Blizzard buff Mercy and just give her more healing? Well, the reason why Blizzard cannot just outright buff Mercy without taking something away from her is because Mercy falls under the very specific niche of pocket support archetypes. And throughout all competitive games out there, whether it be Overwatch, League of Legends, whatever game out there, pocket e-girly type of characters have notoriously always been incredibly hard to balance, to the point where almost maybe even impossible to fully balance. So before I talk about Mercy specifically, I need to talk about pocketing type of e-girl supports in general. I know it's gonna take a while, but bear with me on this. So remember how in concept 1 we talked about how every strategy needs a counter? Well, when it comes to pocket e-girl type of characters, there's always gonna be a problem where the ego character or pocket character can amplify the power of their carries exponentially. Not only is there the problem of how most of the success of winning comes down to the DPS or carries potential or their gameplay, but the problem also lies in how when it comes to the support pick, the e-girl character, not a lot of effort is required on their end to perform well. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't a difference between a bad Mercy and a really good Mercy. What I'm saying is that you don't have to be a good Mercy in order to do well. You don't have to do exceptionally well. You could get away by being mediocre on these ego type of characters in like Mercy or like in any other game, because we've seen it tons and times again where a DPS character just duels with a Mercy player and that Mercy can somehow climb to ranks that they don't deserve to be in. Like, how many times have we seen a Silver Mercy dueling with the top 500 DPS, they get to Grandmaster, and when the Mercy player stops playing with the DPS, they all of a sudden drop back down to Silver. We've seen this countless times happen over the years, and obviously any Bronze player that duels with like a Grandmaster top 500 player is gonna get carried. However, you know, are you gonna prefer a top 500 DPS dueling with a Bronze Reinhardt? Or would you prefer to have a top 500 DPS dueling with a Bronze Mercy? You know, who's gonna climb faster? The Bronze Mercy, the Bronze Symmetra, the Bronze Doomfist dueling with the top 500? Most likely, in every scenario, the Bronze Mercy is gonna climb higher. And that creates a lot of frustration in the community. This is just a problem with the pocketing e-girl type of characters in all games. So this is not just Overwatch, this is not just a Mercy problem. The thing about pocketing type of characters is that they create these like large disparities in game qualities where if they are useless, they're completely useless. But when they are working and paired well with like a really good DPS, they just work so insanely well, and there's just like a big gap in the quality of the game. A lot of these pocketing type of supports are praying and manifesting that they have the better team, which is not really what you want, because you want to be climbing on your own merits. You want to be climbing on your own skill, not because you prayed for a team diff or you prayed for a better DPS. You know, that's not how a competitive game should work. Now, a lot of people complain about Mercy's win rates and use that as a justification, like, oh, she's so bad, look at her win rates, she needs a buff. But the thing is, we've already established with the Bunker Bastion comp example that win rates don't paint the full picture and have honestly very little to do with the discussion, because we're talking about emotions here. We're talking about like loss aversion, which has really very little to do with win rates. So if you're to put yourself in the shoes of not just the Mercy players, but people who play with Mercy and people who verse Mercy, well, one, for Mercy, it's not very fun to have to rely on someone and feel like you're manifesting, or you have to pray for a better team or better DPS character. For the people playing with Mercy, it doesn't feel great to play with Mercy because she's kind of like this like garbage, not so great healer that doesn't heal a lot. Like, how many times have we heard swap up Mercy? I know I've been told to swap up Mercy quite a lot. So it's not really fun for the team to play with a Mercy and feel like they're just like dragging along a dead character. And it's not really fun for the enemy team, because when the enemy team loses to a Mercy, it doesn't matter if they beat Mercy most of the time, but even if they were to lose to a Mercy, it just feels unfun. Like, oh my god, this annoying Mercy won and didn't deserve to win. I'm a better player than this Mercy. I had to work my ass off. My character requires more skill, whatever. And that is totally a valid thing to be worried about, something that game designers or developers have to factor in. So is there a way for competitive games to balance out this like e-girl pocketing pick supports that feel fair for all players involved and also feels rewarding for the support player themselves? Well, there is. There actually is a way to balance this, which I'll get into in a general, not just Overwatch, but like just generally how most games go about it. So when you think about the strategy, concept one, about pocketing, making someone stronger, you have two people generally, your support and your carry that you're pocketing. Now, what would be the counter to that pocketing? Well, you could brute force your way and kill the carry first, which I'm sure you would know is not the greatest of ideas. You can try brute force your way and kill the carry, but the carry is being healed, it's being buffed. So obviously they're much more stronger than what they normally are. Their potential has been elevated because of the e-girl pocketing type of support. It's a two-player type of strategy after all. So not one person can really just brute force their way and kill the carry. It might even take two people to do that. So naturally, the strategy that people would most likely go for is you kill the pocketing support first and then you focus the carry afterwards. This is not even just like a pocketing strategy type of counter. Like you would probably do this against an Ana, against any healing in Overwatch. Like you would most likely focus the healer first, right? Over like killing the tank or the DPS. That's just like a natural thing that the players would think about. So when it comes to the pocketing support, what is their counter to these people that are hunting them down? Well, obviously, a lot of the skill sets when it comes to pocket type of support is surviving. A lot of things is about getting away, positioning correctly, not being in a bad spot, just being able to survive and be self-sufficient against people that are diving them or hunting them down or whatever. So this is kind of the realm in which game designers focus on when trying to address e-girl pocketing type of supports or trying to balance them. So the pocket type supports want to survive, so game designers balance it out by making it so they are vulnerable, that maybe they are much more slower, maybe they're more squishier. These type of things that make these support picks more vulnerable because they're meant to be focused down. That is the counter. That's how you beat pocket type supports. So you can probably kind of see where I'm going with this when it comes to Mercy. However, I'm still not going to talk about Mercy specifically. I'm going to talk about it later. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I will get to her eventually. I promise you. All of this I say is going to be relevant. But before I get to Mercy, I'm going to talk about what makes an unhealthy design for a pocket peeler and what is a healthy design in general for competitive games. And I'm going to use the example of League of Legends. I know League of Legends is a totally different game to Overwatch, but a lot of the concepts I talk about are relevant for both games. So when it comes to League of Legends, it's a MOBA game, and I do have to just mention that healing in League of Legends is just a means to an end. It's not a necessity like in Overwatch. You don't have to be like a healer in League of Legends to win the game. A lot of supports in League of Legends are more crowd control utility based, like stunning and displacements and whatever. However, there are quite a lot of characters in League of Legends that specialize in like buffing, healing, and being like an e-girl type of enchanter, and so they are relevant to the discussion. I'm gonna start off with a champion in League of Legends called Yuumi, and they are a character that I would consider to be a very unhealthy character or unhealthy design of a pocket e-girl support, and a huge failure, honestly. For the uninitiated, Yuumi is a support character that has the ability to attach herself onto an ally and become untargetable, which essentially means she cannot be killed for the most part until her partner dies. Even if her partner does die or is close to dying, she can actually just hop onto another ally pretty freely and just be death free. Her other abilities includes healing, shielding, buffing the allies' damage, and a slow for crowd control. So she is the ultimate e-girl type of character. As you would imagine, this champion sparked a lot of controversy and uproar in the community and frustration to this day, that so many people consider this champion to be a failure because it undermines the competitive integrity of League of Legends. Me being part of it, I also, as an Enchanter player or e-girl player, I loved support, I also think Yuumi is a complete failure of a character. It's gotten so bad to the point that even Riot, the company that created League of Legends, had to step in and create a blog post about this topic and whether or not they should delete Yuumi. In this post, they explicitly said how they do not believe Yuumi is in a balanced state, and they acknowledge that it is incredibly frustrating to verse a Yuumi. This just goes back to concept 1, remember the Bunker Bastion example, where it doesn't really even matter if people can beat a Yuumi most of the time. It doesn't matter that Yuumi has a low win rate, because even when they are winning against Yuumi, it's frustrating, and when they lose against Yuumi, it's even more frustrating. In Yuumi's case, she completely bypasses the skill expression that is traditionally needed and used to design pocket healers. Remember, pocket healers are meant to survive. That's a lot of their skill sets, where a lot of the skill sets come from. So for Yuumi to be able to just attach onto someone and become untargetable and not be able to be killed, she just bypasses all of those skills and really just needs to spam one button to heal and shield her teammates. And because she cannot be killed, you are now forced to focus down the carry, which, like we've said before, is much harder to do than said, because this person is being pocketed by Yuumi. Their potential has been transcended to a higher level than what they normally should be. And for those that don't know, in League of Legends, you get stronger by getting levels and getting gold to buy items. So if someone is fed and strong already, and then on top of that have a Yuumi to exponentially make them even more stronger, you can only imagine how nearly impossible it is to beat that. Although Yuumi for the most part is a useless character, there are many times when I have played Yuumi and I did not deserve to win on Yuumi. I inted, I fed, I didn't do anything, I was playing horribly, but I was lucky enough to have a character on my team be really strong. And what did I do? I just sat on him and we 2v5'd. I literally didn't do anything, I just spammed E, healed him, and I won. Was it a deserving win? No. You know, you might even just say oh, well, that feels great, you won, but you have to think about the other side, and the other side is probably very frustrated and not having a great time versing this 2v5 Yuumi and carry. And I've been on the other side. I've been on the side where I beat a Yuumi, I destroyed her in lane, I did so much work, and I feel like I deserve to win, but on the other side, she had a teammate that got fed and she sat on it, and then she destroyed my team. 2v5 my whole entire team, there was nothing we could do. And that doesn't feel great at all, right? Again, it doesn't matter if for the most part I beat Yuumi. All it matters is that I lost to Yuumi in the first place, which, loss aversion makes it so we feel a lot more worse. There have also been times when people would play Yuumi on a second computer or account with their feet. I'm not joking when I say that. Their feet. I don't know if I really need to say much more about this character. If you can play Yuumi on your feet and pocket yourself when you're playing a carrier, then there's something really wrong. I don't know what else needs to be said. There have also been people who do cooking streams whilst playing Yuumi as a hee hee ha ha moment, look at me, I can play this easy character whilst multitasking cooking. I don't really think more needs to be said about how easy it is to get value on Yuumi in specific but somewhat rare games. She has to pray that she gets lucky. She needs to have a great character on her team, a fed character, but it does happen. That does happen. So Yuumi is what I would consider a very, very unhealthy, biggest failure of competitive gaming design for a e-girl pocketing type of support. So what do I think is a healthy design for a pocket pick? Well, I would use Overwatch for an example, but Overwatch doesn't really have many characters 10 supports, and none of them really have that pocketing type of archetype like Mercy. So there's really no Overwatch example that I can draw from. So I'm just gonna use another League of Legends character, and that is Soraka. So Soraka is a character in League of Legends that specializes in healing. Most of her kit revolves around healing. She's very like e-girl pocketing type of character. So just imagine a character in Overwatch that can heal for 200 health per second, like with their left clicks, and that's kind of like Soraka. You might even think like, wow, a character in Overwatch that can heal for 200? Like, that's insane, that's so much healing. Well, what makes Soraka fair, and why does she have so much healing numbers? Well, remember how we spoke about concept 2? Kit budgeting, where for every give to something, there needs to be a takeaway in a character design. Well, although Soraka has a lot of healing, like a lot of healing, she's balanced out by the downsides that she has to overcome. So number one is that she actually has incredibly low range for her healing. She almost has to stand right next to her target to heal them, which would obviously compromise her positioning, which means she's left in a more vulnerable state, which means she's easier to dive and kill. Number two is that she actually has to sacrifice 10% of her max HP in order to heal someone. Now, she does have other abilities to offset this type of effect, and she can kind of heal herself through other means, but for the most part, you cannot heal on Soraka indefinitely. She's at some point going to run out of HP, and the lower she drops, the more vulnerable she's gonna be, which means more people are going to target her and want to kill her. Right? This design makes it so Soraka players cannot just brainlessly heal people, they have to make very thoughtful, skillful decisions and manage their health properly. Number three is that she has very little escape abilities. She does have a slow to peel for herself and she can heal herself a little bit. She has a root and she can silence, which is like a Sombra hack, and she does have movement speed. So she does have a little bit going for herself, but for the most part, she doesn't have a lot of like self-sufficient peeling tools. She's pretty vulnerable, and a lot of people are going to focus her down and want to kill her. Especially in higher ranks when people will jump on you, they will not let you live, and you can die in less than a second. And I'm not exaggerating with that. You will die in less than a second if you are in the wrong position as Soraka. Number four is that in League of Legends, you can buy anti-healing items, which reduce the healing output by 40%. It's a pretty cheap price of 800 gold, so people can buy it pretty early on. And as you would imagine, for a character that specializes in healing like Soraka, that 40% healing reduction means a lot. It's a big counter to Soraka. So with this concept too about kit budgeting and give and take, you can see that Soraka has really high healing, but it's justified by all the downsides that she has. Soraka players constantly have to manage their health, they have to be very wary of their positioning, she's very unforgiving, she doesn't have like many dashes, so if you're caught in the wrong position, you're dead. So there's a lot of skill involved with surviving on Soraka that justifies her healing, and it also feels fair on the enemy team because the enemy team, although it probably will be frustrated at Soraka's healing, there is a very clear path and goal plan for them, which is kill the Soraka. Most people focus the Soraka before they focus the carry, and it's a very doable thing, you know? It's not like an impossible feat because Soraka is so vulnerable. You also didn't really require like a whole team effort to kill Soraka. Honestly, even one person can handle Soraka if they're playing the right character, and many characters can do that, so you don't need a whole team effort to kill one Soraka. You can just do it by yourself. So this is why I would consider Soraka to be a very healthy type of design for an e-girl pocketing support in a competitive game. So now we can finally talk about Mercy. Where does Mercy lie in the spectrum of unhealthy and healthy type of a design? Well, you can probably already guess that I think Mercy leans a lot closer to Yumi's side of unhealthy design. So why is that? Well, let's have a look at Mercy's kit. So her key designs are that she does not need to aim, which is a valuable thing in a shooting game. It means that she has the luxury of consistency. She does not need to reload, which is also a great thing. That's another luxury of consistency, so that's a give. She can also heal through shields like Winston bubbles, so that is another consistency factor that is a give to her kit. She also has a res ability which can give someone a second chance at playing the game, which I'll get into a bit later, but the biggest problem that Mercy has is her survivability. This is the reason why Mercy seemingly cannot be balanced. The dashing is the main problem with Mercy. Now don't get me wrong, I love Mercy. I am team Mercy, I want the best for Mercy, and I love Mercy's dashing. I think it's incredibly fun, a lot of people find it fun, and I cannot really imagine a world where Mercy doesn't dash around or fly around. It's kind of what makes her so fun and her. However, if we're purely talking about competitive integrity, her dashes is just a contradiction to what is generally used to balance the e-girl pocketing archetype in any competitive game. Remember, survivability is something a lot of e-girl type supports are meant to learn and do. So if you give them tools to make that job easier, it only makes them a less skillful character. And I'm not the only one that can see this because funnily enough, before I was streaming this video, I was on the toilet scrolling through TikTok. I came across this Overwatch video, and the Overwatch video was this Soldier 76 shooting down Mercy, like a little bit of a montage moment. And one of the comments said, the effort it takes to play Mercy and the effort it takes to kill Mercy is so skewed. And that is very, very true. That is so real. And I feel like anyone that has played DPS or any like damage type characters would agree to that. They would know that it's a lot more harder to kill Mercy than playing Mercy's dashing herself, right? Now I know there are going to be some Mercy players out there that say like, oh, well, Mercy does take skill and it's very hard to survive because, you know, everyone's coming for you and she's vulnerable, she doesn't have any defensive capabilities or whatever. And like, number one, well, everyone needs to learn to survive. Like, you know, surviving on Mercy or surviving on Ana, which one is easier? Positioning on Mercy or positioning on like Doomfist, which one is easier? Most likely it's going to be Mercy. And number two, well, let's see you play DPS. Let's see you play DPS and try kill a Mercy and see which one is more easier. Chances are you're gonna find playing Mercy and zapping around, dashing around a lot more easier than aiming and killing her. Now, I'm not trying to say any of this to shade Mercy players or make them feel bad or anything like that, because I've been trying to think about how I could word this without making Mercy mains upset or mad, but the reality is Mercy is on the easier side compared to other characters, and I don't really think there's any other way to say it nicely. Like, if someone is upset at that, then it is what it is. I don't think I can do much about it. Now, there might be like a small handful of Mercy mains out there that might use the argument like, just get good, just kill the Mercy forehead, it's not that hard. But that just circles back to concept one with like the Bunker Bastion and even Yumi example that we talked about. It doesn't matter if someone is good enough to be a Mercy or good enough to be a Bunker Bastion comp or good enough to be a Yumi, it's still always gonna be very frustrating to beat those things. So even if you win, you're still feeling frustrated and annoyed and stressed. And that argument could also be used against the Mercy, like, Mercy is not in a good spot and needs healing buffs, well, just get good. Mercy doesn't need buffs, just get good at Mercy. You know, it's not really a valid argument. So the last thing about Mercy's kit is that she has a healing of 55 health per second, which is not a lot. It's on the lower end of the healers, but why is that the case? A lot of people want this to be buffed. They want it to be maybe 60 or 65 or just more healing in general for Mercy. But with the key designs that Mercy has, like not needing to reload, not needing to aim, etc., Blizzard actually cannot buff Mercy because of that. The gift to Mercy's strength is her high mobility and her consistency of not needing to aim, reload, heal 3 bubbles, that there has to be a takeaway in her kit. And the only thing that can take away is obviously the numbers on her healing. Like, imagine if Mercy could heal the same amount of health as Anna. Like, that wouldn't make any sense. Like, why should Anna heal the same amount as Mercy when Anna has to aim and she has to reload and her bullets can be blocked by shields? Like, it just would not make sense, right? Like, the reason why Mercy is justified with her low 55 healing per second is because of her high strengths in other areas. Now, I'm not saying that aim characters deserve to be better than non-aim characters. I'm not saying that auto-aim, no-aim characters deserve to be in dumpster tier. What I am saying is that these numbers that Anna has or whatever aim character has, their numbers can be justified by the fact that they need to aim, or there's an inconsistency factor within their kit. Now, some people might just think like, oh, well, so what? Why does it matter that Mercy has all of this? Like, why can't they just buff Mercy's healing from 55 to 60? Like, it's just so abysmally low, and there are a lot of other characters that seem overloaded, so why can't Mercy just get some love? Now, number one, yes, I do agree that there are some characters that are overloaded. Like, as of making this video, I believe Kiriko is getting nerfs to her, whatever it's called, that cleanse, and some other characters are getting nerfs. So I totally understand that there are some characters out there that seem very overloaded and deserve nerfs, and they are getting nerfed. So we love that. And number two is that I'm not saying that every character that receives a buff needs a nerf to balance it out or compensate, because there are definitely some characters that are really, really bad and deserve some love. For example, Lifeweaver, I don't think is in a very good spot and deserves some love, some buffs, without anything being taken away from him. However, when it comes to Mercy, I don't believe that she deserves any outright buffs because she falls under the e-girl pocket archetype. And throughout all of history, when it comes to competitive games, this archetype has always been incredibly hard to balance. We've already spoken about how the pocket type of characters rely on the success of their DPS duos or whatever. And you can even see their win rates rising. Like in Mercy's case, you can see that the win rates of Bronze Mercy is pretty low, but it gets higher up as she gets higher in ranks, up into Grandmaster, top 500 or whatever. So you can see that a lot of success comes from the actual players that they play with rather than just the player themselves. It's incredibly hard to make these tiny adjustments to these pocket type supports like Mercy because an increase of like 5 healing or whatever could mean literally nothing to Mercy or mean everything to Mercy. Like imagine, even if Mercy did get a buff to her healing like 55 to 60 or even 65 healing per second, Mercy pocketing a bronze DPS, it's not gonna mean anything. That bronze DPS is still gonna flop, it's still gonna die. I mean, the floor might be raised a little bit where she wins more games, but you have to think about like the other side where if she can pocket a top 500 DPS player, all of a sudden that 60-65 healing is worth way more. And that only furthers the gap that, you know, Mercy mains kind of come across, the fluctuation of insanely horrible, useless games, and then unbelievably god tier, unbeatable, frustrating to verse against. And this is also the reason why Resurrect is such a horrible ability, because it is an ability that further exacerbates this problem. Yes, you can resurrect your teammates like your tank or whatever, but for the most part, most Mercy mains are probably gonna save that Resurrect for their good DPS character. I remember the time when Mercy had that rework where her res was instant when she fucked, like, and could reset it. And I remembered, I think it was Calvin or something, but there was a Twitter clip where some top 500 pro player got res 3 to 4 times in a fight, like within the span of like 30 seconds or something, I can't remember. He got res 3 to 4 times. And that's insane. Anyone can see that and be like, oh my god, that is unfair. Anyone can look at that and be like, that just should not be in the game at all. Like, yes, you can res your team, yes, you can res your tank, but if you have like this incredibly OP cracked DPS player and you're resing them constantly and pocketing them constantly, it just makes them transcend and elevated to a level that they shouldn't be. Like, this DPS player normally should not be at this level, but they can because they have Mercy pocketing them or whatever. Another thing to factor in when balancing a character like a pocket pick or Mercy or whatever is asking the question like, should a solo Mercy player be heavily disadvantaged compared to Mercy players that have a duo, that have the luxury to duo with an E-boy or whatever? Obviously the answer is no. A solo Mercy should not be disadvantaged and should be able to be on the same playing field as someone who does solo to a certain degree, right? But we've seen countless times and again, like, Mercy players can get carried very, very easily, more easily than other characters, and that's just not really healthy game design. That's something that Blizzard would need to address. A lot of people find that Mercy is an easy character to play and that her rank is not really reflective or an accurate representation of the amount of skill and effort needed to be at that rank, because Mercy players just, are playing an easy character and just get boosted into Grandmaster or whatever. I am also inclined to kind of agree to that to a certain degree. There's also something I have to talk about when it comes to this discussion about like, is Mercy bad, good, does she deserve buffs, whatever? And that is one-trick Mercy players. Now, I do love one-tricking in a game. I used to be a one-trick Symmetra, and coming from League of Legends, a game where you can one-trick a character, I love one-tricking and I hate counter-swapping, like I really do. But sometimes people take it a bit too far in the one-tricking to the point where it runs into delusion. At some point, when you're one-tricking a character in Overwatch, you're just gonna have to accept the fact that sometimes your character is just not the right character in that specific scenario for the team comp or against the enemy team comp. Like, yes, Mercy does deserve a change and deserves some sort of love. However, sometimes in some scenarios, Mercy is not working because Mercy is not the right pick. It has nothing to do with Mercy being like a bad, like unbalanced character. Like, imagine if Widowmaker was complaining about how she's too weak and needed buffs, but she's playing against a Winston, Genji Tracer, and full-on dive comp. Like, you would think they were crazy. Like, girl, there's nothing wrong with the Widowmaker. The problem isn't Widowmaker. The problem is you're playing Widowmaker into dive. And that's how I feel about sometimes with Mercy players that one-trick Mercy. Like, yes, Mercy's not in the greatest spot, but Mercy is not the right pick here. Like, you should be swapping. And if you don't want to swap, then you should at least be aware of the fact that your character is not the right character and it has nothing to do with Mercy being somewhat bad. I find that when it comes to Mercy players, they expect buffs and changes that allow them to one-trick Mercy in a game that shouldn't be really one-trickable and thrives off counter swapping. Not saying that I like that. I don't like counter swapping. I find it incredibly boring. And I don't think many people enjoy it. I mean, like, look at tank players. Like, I'm pretty sure tank players hate counter swapping because tanks have to do it the most. I would love for a world where we get to play whatever which character we want and just one-trick them and have fun and thrive and win. But we don't live in that world. We don't have those systems. And so counter swapping is an important thing. And I feel like Mercy mains don't really want to do that, and they expect changes that make Mercy in this god tier where she can be one-trickable in every scenario. And that's just not possible. Mercy cannot be good in brawl comps, in dive comps, in poke comps, against everybody in the cast, like with everyone. Like, she can't be that. She can't be everything. So there needs to be like some sort of reasonable expectation when it comes to changing Mercy. Now, I know there would be Mercy players that would love the idea of being able to one-trick Mercy and have changes that help with that. But then anyone can say that, right? Like, a Symmetra player could be like, well, if you can one-trick Mercy, then I should be also able to one-trick my Symmetra. I should have infinite range and beam down a Pharah and kill a Widowmaker from afar. And then maybe a Reinhardt player can be like, well, if you can one-trick Symmetra and Mercy, then I should also be able to one-trick Reinhardt, and I deserve buffs where I can shatter and then everyone gets stunned. I can Fire Strike, and Fire Strike is an instant kill hit scan ability. Like, who's to say that, buffs shouldn't be handed out to everyone and that everyone shouldn't just be able to be one-trickable? And then we'd just be back in square one, where if everyone gets buff, everyone gets strong, then, you know, there's someone gonna be at the bottom, someone has to be the weakest, and most likely it's gonna be Mercy. So, you know, as much as I love one-tricking, there needs to be some reasonable expectation. Now, this is gonna be a bit of a side rant section, which kind of relates to this like one-trick Mercy thing, is that the reason why there are so many one-tricks out there is that there aren't any other characters that are similar to those said like one-tricks. So, for example, like a Grandmaster Mercy player or whatever that climbs really high with Mercy, she doesn't really have many other characters to swap to. You know, most Mercy players probably might swap to Moira because, you know, lack of aiming required. But for the most part, the skill sets don't really correlate. The skill sets don't really transfer over well in the slightest at all. And Overwatch does not help with that, like at all. Like if we had more characters in Overwatch, like more supports that were similar to Mercy, then Mercy players would feel more inclined to swap off Mercy and play these other characters that are similar enough. Like how is it that we've gone through so many years of Overwatch and only like 10 supports? Like I cannot be the only one that thinks that's crazy to have 10 supports in a span of like how many years now? That's crazy. And this is actually a philosophical design that Blizzard has actively done with Overwatch and in the other games as well. But in Overwatch, I believe it was Jeff Kaplan, but they specifically said that they do not want Overwatch to have characters that overlap with each other. They want every character to be very unique, have their own unique playstyle and whatever. And they also believe that there is a such thing as too many characters in Overwatch. Too many characters in a game. I think that's all utterly like complete bull crap. Because for a game to pride itself on the diversity and inclusion of like, there's a hero for everyone. Like if you're a MMORPG player, there's a Holy Trinity. If you cannot aim, then there are non-aim characters. If you love building turrets, there is the turret. But like, you know, Overwatch was marketed as this game that was like, there's a hero for everyone. There's bound to be a character that you love. And so you would think that coming into it like, oh, I get to play whatever character I want. But that's not the case. In practice, when you play ranked or whatever, you're expected to swap, which goes against the whole like marketing of Overwatch, like a hero for everyone. It's crazy to think that with this counter swapping type of philosophy that they have, we only have like 10 supports or 40 characters in total. Like, hello? Going back to League of Legends has like 160 characters, and a lot of these characters kind of do overlap. So for example, when it comes to support, there are a lot of archetypes. There's like tank supports, there's poke supports, like mage supports, or enchanter, ego type of supports. Now within those archetypes, there are even more characters within them that kind of fill that niche, but also differ in a little bit. So for example, in the enchanter ego realm, we have shielders like Janna, Lulu, and Karma. All three of them shield. In fact, they have pretty much the same like point and click ability. The thing that differentiates them is that Janna is more of like a peeling type of enchanter. So she specializes in protecting her teammates and peeling for them with crowd control. Lulu specializes in pocketing her hypercarry. Karma specializes in more early aggression, pokey, mage-like abilities, and late game AoE shielding, speed boosting. So if someone were to play enchanter like supports, like shielders, and let's just say one of them gets banned because you can ban in League of Legends, then there are other enchanters that are similar enough in skill sets that they can play. That can't be said with Overwatch. If a Mercy player cannot play Mercy because maybe someone picks Mercy, or Mercy is just not in the right position, not the right like character to play and they need to swap off, well then there's nothing to really swap off to. You know, there's just not enough overlapping characters, which I feel like Overwatch needs to do. Like, hello, I don't understand why we have 10 supports in all these years. It's just crazy to me. So that's a bit of a side rant for me. Like, Overwatch, create more characters. Like, you could fix this like one-tricking problem if you just did this. Okay, so we're very long into the video, we've done a lot of talking, and we can finally get onto the question, and that is, how do we fix Mercy? How do we make Mercy a healthy pocket type of character? Well, there are two different ways that Blizzard can approach this, and that is, number one, they can keep her pocketing design if they want to be that stubborn. Number two is that they need to rework her in a way that deviates her away from the pocket playstyle, or at the very least incentivize her to help out other players on the team. Now, the first approach is not really something I would like in the game because I feel like it would make Mercy a lot less fun. However, if we're talking about purely competitive integrity, it is a viable way of balancing Mercy. And that is the only way that Blizzard can give Mercy more healing that's fair is by taking away something from her kit that makes her more in line with what is traditionally the counter or strategy against pocket picking, which is survivability. So that means Blizzard has to nerf her survivability by maybe one, increasing her dash cooldown, which they have already done by 1 second, and I know that caused a big uproar, but it is justified. It is totally a viable and justifiable option. It's not gonna make her feel good, it makes her feel clunkier, it makes her possibly less fun, but it's a viable option if they want to increase her healing. Number two is that they could reduce the range of her dashing. That would mean she has to stand closer to the person, which compromises her positioning, which means it makes her more vulnerable and susceptible to getting dived upon. They could reduce the range of her healing beam, which, compromises positioning. Number four is that they could make it so healing beam doesn't heal through bubbles or shields or anything, which again is going to compromise her positioning. I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, all these changes are just going to make Mercy more easier to kill and easier to die, whatever. And that's exactly the point. She needs to have more vulnerability, more of an opportunity for enemies to deal with her, to warrant and justify her having more healing, especially for a character that does not need to aim, does not need to reload, and is under the pocket archetype where a lot of her success relies on her teammates. We want to have the skills and success shifted from her carries back into the player itself. There needs to be changes where Mercy is deserving of these more healing numbers or whatever, rather than just praying and manifesting a better DPS to carry them. Again, I don't like these changes, and I probably would not want these changes because it would feel less fun. Like I said, I am Team Mercy. I want the best for Mercy, and I love playing Mercy. And I cannot really imagine Mercy not having a dash or her dash being long cooldown. That would feel horrible. But if we're gonna put all of that aside, like the fun aspect aside, and just talking about purely competitive integrity, this is a viable option. Now, the second approach that Blizzard can go about fixing Mercy is to just get her out of the pocket healing archetype altogether. So Blizzard needs to think of things that let Mercy help her team as a whole without, and the keyword is without, making one person any more stronger than the current Mercy does. That is to say that the power of Mercy needs to swap from pocketing just one person to helping her whole entire team, and therefore redistributing the power, which is subsequently makes the game quality more consistent because there isn't just one person that the Mercy is relying on, but a whole entire team that she can rely on. So not one person can carry her, but also not one person can drag her game down. Some people have suggested that Mercy could get an ability where she can increase her healing for like 5 seconds or however long, and I'm here to say that that change is horrible. Horrible. Very, very bad idea. Now, having the ability to increase your healing for a set duration might sound great at first glance because, you know, Mercy does like a lot of healing, but guess where all that healing is gonna go to? You might heal the tank, but most likely it's all gonna go to that DPS carry that she's pocketing. All that healing that's going into that DPS character is just gonna make them even more harder to kill than they already are, which is not what we want. We don't want Mercy to rely on one person. We want her to rely on her own skills and the team as a whole. So now I'm gonna give you some examples of some gameplay designs that are traditionally used to increase numbers without the pocket playstyle, and examples that won't make one DPS character like uber strong, godly tier, like unbeatable. Number one is that they could give Mercy some AoE healing. This is not exactly a fun idea, but I'm just throwing this idea out just for the sake of like an example. Because AoE healing is good at increasing your numbers for everyone, but obviously it doesn't really help one singular person all that much. Think about Lucio. Like, a Lucio doesn't really pocket a Genji or anything. A Lucio can get really good healing numbers if they stay by the team, but yeah, it doesn't really help one singular person all that much. And so if Mercy was to have AoE healing, not only will that increase her healing numbers, but it will also incentivize her to stay with her team more and not go flanking off with some random DPS, you know? So that would be a nice way to get her away, deviate her away from the pocket playstyle and incentivize her to stay with the team. Number two is that Mercy could have a healing over time ability. Think about Brigitte. So healing in over time in almost every single game out there would always have more numbers, like higher value than burst type of effects. The caveat to healing over time, damage over time, or whatever is that you need to wait its full duration to reap its benefit. And time is not really a luxury that everyone has, especially in a competitive game. So if Mercy had some healing over time effects, that would incentivize her to stay by her team more to reapply the healing over time and be less inclined to stay by her DPS carry that's flanking off in Narnia. Healing over time would also be a healthy option because it doesn't really make someone all that much stronger, because it's not like an insane amount of healing per second. It's just a lot of healing if you wait that long, which, you know, some DPS players just won't have the luxury for that. So healing over time is a viable option in terms of helping or fixing some of Mercy's problems. Now, the next change that I'm going to suggest is something that I think Blizzard should really look into. I think it's a really, really good idea, and it's my most favorite idea, and that Mercy should heal characters based on their max HP. This is different and not the same from when Mercy could increase healing for people below 50% HP, which, by the way, was a failure because that only furthers the pocketing playstyle. But yeah, this is not the same as that. What I'm saying is that people with higher HP should be healed more compared to people with lower HP. Now, I don't want you to focus too hard on the numbers because numbers can be changed pretty easily. I just want you to focus on the idea. So, for example, Mercy could have a base healing of 40 plus 5% of max HP per second. So if we take Genji for an example who has 250 HP, Mercy would heal Genji for 40 plus 5% of 250, which would mean 40 plus 12.5, and that equals to 52.5 HP per second. However, if Mercy were to heal someone like Roadhog who has 800 HP, she would heal for 40 base plus 5% of 800, which would be 40 plus 40, which equals 80 health per second. So if Mercy were to heal these tanks, she can heal them more. Now again, don't get hung up too much on the numbers because Blizzard can change the numbers however they want. They can make it 3%, 5%, 6%, base 30, base 40, whatever, right? I want you to focus on just the idea of like max percent HP healing. That I think would be an amazing change for Mercy because Mercy struggles at healing tanks. We all know this. Mercy is great at healing squishies, but she struggles with healing big, beefy people like Roadhog, Reinhardt, or whatever. This would also benefit characters like Bastion, who is a DPS character but has 350 HP. The thing about health boards is that you can justify those numbers based on the size of a character and their abilities. So for example, Genji has 250 HP because he has a smaller hitbox and he dashes a lot. Right? He has a lot of survivability. The reason why Roadhog has 800 HP is because he has a big hitbox. And the bigger hitbox means he is susceptible to more incoming damage. He takes more damage, which warrants the higher health pool. On the other side, that means people like Anna or whichever aiming healer can heal a Roadhog more easily than healing a Genji, right? It's a lot more easier for an Anna to land her healing shots on a big tank like Roadhog than it is to heal a jumping small hitbox Genji. So even Anna can benefit from Roadhog's big hitbox. That cannot be said with Mercy. Mercy's constant healing beam, non-aim, doesn't really care for if it's a big hitbox Roadhog or if it's a small hitbox Genji. It's still the same consistency. I feel like this max HP healing for Mercy would be an incredibly great idea because, you know, now she can heal tanks a lot more. So that's great, number one. Number two is that she can help out people, not just tanks, but people with higher hitboxes like Bastion, who, you know, have a bigger hitbox. And then that like also makes it so Anna doesn't outright have more of an advantage against Mercy because, you know, bigger hitbox for Anna is like easier to aim, easier to heal. So Mercy can also kind of have that same advantage based on like the hitbox of people and health pools. But number three is that if she wants to pocket a DPS character that's like a soldier or like a Genji, the healing is going to be less for those pocketed people, you know? And Mercy now has to decide on, does she want to leave her team, go off and flank with her squishy Genji, or does she want to stay by her team and have more healing for her tank? Now this might open the doors to a problem of Mercy pocketing the tank, like maybe there's a really cracked Doomfist or a cracked Zarya or whatever, and Mercy might pocket them, and we might be back at square one where it's a horrible disaster. However, if that ever happens, number one, Blizzard can just change the numbers, like make it a little bit lower or whatever. And number two, they could always just make her survivability less, you know, nerf her survivability, so it warrants that high healing output from Mercy. So those are just some suggestions as to how Blizzard can increase Mercy's healing output without making her or furthering her pocket playstyle. Now let's get into Resurrect, and honestly, I think they should just remove Resurrect. I think Resurrect has always been a really difficult, almost impossible type of ability to balance. And as much as I love the 5-man res, it was just a broken ability. It was not a balanced ability at all. Like, I'm sure you all remember the time when Mercy got reworked and her res could get, you know, reset and she could res like 3 to 4 times in a row. That was just totally a disaster. Horrible, horrible, horrible. Now, if Blizzard wants to keep Resurrect as an ability in the game, which I don't think they should, but some people really love it. Some people think that Mercy's res is like what makes her her, like her identity, which I don't think so. I think her dashing is like really what makes her identity, but some people love Resurrect, and I know Blizzard is very stubborn, so they might choose to keep Resurrect. So if Blizzard does want to keep res in the game, then there needs to be a system for Mercy where she has to work for the res. The res cannot just be like, wait 30 seconds, because that's just too passive. It's too easy for the Mercy to just wait 30-second cooldown and then just use it again. So what do I mean about a system that makes her work for it? Well, Blizzard could give Resurrect some sort of resource management system. So for example, a Mercy could charge her resource bar by applying healing with time or buffs or whatever to her team, and the longer these effects stay on her allies, the more she charges her resource bar. Think of like Moira, for example. And so when that resource bar reaches a certain threshold or maybe full or whatever, that is when she can resurrect. And so number one, that's great because it makes Mercy's work for the resurrect. Number two, it's like a skill-based thing where good Mercy players will know how to manage that resource and reapply, you know, buffs. And by the way, it doesn't have to be like this reapplying buff strategy. It could be anything. I'm just talking about a resource management system or just literally anything that makes Mercy have to work for a res, right? Just anything. And number three, this would be good because if, let's just say we're talking about this like reapplying Healing of Time effect, it means that a Mercy player would have to stay with her team to reapply these buffs. She cannot just go flanking off with her Genji DPS or flanking soldier or whatever. I mean, like, she could if she wanted to, but that means she would recharge her Resurrect a lot slower than if she were staying by her team. So there's a toss-up of like the option of if you want to pocket your DPS, you can. However, if you stay by your team, you would recharge your resource a lot more and get more healing output, like number-wise. So, you know, there's the option to play pocketing or play with the team or whatever. And I think that would be healthy. We want Mercy to have options, you know? Although I don't really like the pocketing playstyle, we don't have to completely get rid of it if there are other options and if the pocketing playstyle is not like overly offensively broken or like too strong. So whatever the ability you want to keep for Mercy, whether it be a resurrect ability or some sort of utility or whatever, there needs to be a system in place that makes Mercies work for it. And this is just a very incredibly important thing for the pocket e-girl type of character. So this is not just Mercy, this is just like a thing that most competitive games implement into their pocket type supports to balance them out. Remember Soraka from League of Legends? Like Soraka having high healing, you know, she has low range, sacrifices her HP, there's healing cut in the game, she is very vulnerable, doesn't have any dashes. Like there's a lot of things that Soraka has to do in order to work towards higher healing. It's not just given to her on a silver platter, she has to work for that healing. But yeah, hopefully all these examples and ideas gets you thinking about what changes you could make to Mercy. And just remember that if you are thinking about a suggestion for Mercy or an idea, that it needs to be something that takes her away from the pocketing style. We don't want to further exacerbate the problem that is pocketing. We want her to have changes that redistributes the power to her whole entire team. Anyways, that was a very long discussion, and to summarize, Mercy's low healing numbers are justified by her kit, you know, being very consistent, without needing to aim or reload. She has high survivability that makes her bypass a lot of the skill sets required traditionally for pocket type healers. And just pocketing type of characters have been notoriously very hard to balance. So that's why Blizzard cannot just outright give a buff to Mercy, because that little tiny change can make or break the entire like game and competitive integrity of Overwatch. The only way Blizzard can give a buff to Mercy is if they compensate by nerfing something out of her, and that would be her survivability, or just completely reworking her. I hope everything that I've said makes sense, and you know, I don't really normally make all these like video essay yapping type of videos, but this was just something on my mind that I've been seeing a lot of, and I just want to talk about it, honestly. I tried to word everything pretty carefully as to not upset any Mercy mains out there. I hope I didn't upset anyone out there. I wasn't trying to, you know, I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad for playing Mercy or whatever. I'm not trying to like undermine someone's, you know, skill or value. So hopefully no one was upset by it. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please give this video a like and subscribe, and just comment anything, like comment Mercy, comment algorithm, whatever. And I don't know if I'll make more of these like video type essays, because I mostly make more like gameplay type of like stream stuff, but you know, if you'd love to watch all of that, please do, and subscribe to the channel. Anyways, I hope you all have a lovely day, and thank you for watching. Bye bye!